I arrived in the valley known in legends as the Labyrinth of Silent Glaciers. According to the elders, it was here, at 4,000 meters above sea level, that caravans vanished and a low, guttural roar echoed through the night. On the first day, I set up camp near the pass and began gathering stories from those returning from the mountains. Shepherd Tenzin, a gray-haired man with eyes the color of ice, recounted how one night he saw a figure standing on the cliff opposite him. I went out to greet the sheep and froze. Atop the ridge sat something inhuman. I saw a head framed by thick white fur and massive shoulders casting a shadow on the snow. The figure didn't move, as if carved from ice. I fell silent, then ran down without looking back. His account was backed by strange patches on the snow, prints about 1/2 meter long, arranged in 2 parallel rows, as if the creature were sidling along, testing the slope step by step. That very evening, I found those prints myself, even deep impressions with a crisp contour resembling the straight teeth of a saw. They vanished into a crack between the rocks, ending abruptly with no trace beyond. The next day, I consulted an ancient scroll in the monastery library. It told of the guardian of the foothills, said to hunt under the full moon. 18th century lamas described a white shadow that watched over sacred springs, guiding lost travelers but never making contact. It appears when signs are needed, then departs, leaving only tracks in the snow. That night I positioned myself by the fissure where the tracks led. The moon hid behind clouds, and only my flashlight carved a circle of light on the white stone. From the silence came a faint rustle, then sounds like snow being shaken from a branch. I closed my eyes and listened. A soft moan revealed the presence of something living, not wind or rock. In the darkness, a silhouette flickered. A tall figure slowly emerged, its head bowed slightly, arms hanging by its sides, knees bent as if ready to spring. White fur merged with the icy air, and I caught only the glint of its eyes. 2 yellowish lights. A sudden flurry of snowflakes then obscured everything the moment I raised my flashlight. By morning, I found a 3rd set of prints on the ground. They began near my tent and led toward the gorge, never losing depth. Beside each impression lay small pieces of bark, as if the creature had been nibbling pine needles and discarded the scraps. I photographed them and logged them under the heading Contact Number 1 at dawn. Later, the local guide Lhama explained that mountain foxes roam these parts, but their tracks are entirely different, narrow and light. No one has ever found fox fur that resembles the fluff of a snowstorm. According to the guides, the Yeti feeds on bark and resin to survive the freezing nights, often leaving its treats on the rocks. At sunset, I climbed the ridge and spotted a haze in the distance masking a figure. Through the mist, I saw a tall back, and a little way off, the faintest movement of a hand. The creature seemed to be prowling, inspecting each stone. I jotted a few lines in my notebook. April 11th, 1745. Shadow on the ridge about 2 meters tall. A slow wave of the hand. When the full moon broke through the clouds, I felt a shiver. Its light cut through the fog, revealing a silhouette standing on the edge of a ledge. The creature lifted its head, and in the silence I heard a low moan, the very voice of the mountains. Then it turned and vanished into the labyrinth of rocks, leaving behind only those even tracks and a faint echo of its roar. By dawn, I understood that the shepherd's stories were no fiction, but proof of a real, albeit rare, phenomenon. In these mountains lives something more than myth. Tracks lead to new trails, Legends open the archives of ancient scrolls, and nocturnal encounters reveal that the guardian of the foothills still wanders where the snow never melts, and the wind whispers secrets fit for the boldest of tales. The morning after the full moon, I descended to the village at the glacier's foot. A narrow stone bridge spanned a roaring stream and led to the shepherds' huts, where I met a young woman named Lhakpa, whose father had vanished years before while trying to photograph the white figure. He disappeared at night, Lhakpa told me. He left only his camera and rucksack at the entrance to the grotto. Since then, we're afraid to go there alone. She showed me frames from an old videotape. In the dim lamplight by the fissure appeared something tall, cloaked in thick fur. The figure lowered its hand, as if touching the rock face, and there flashed the shimmer of eyes, yellowish like a puma's, but far too large. In an ancient folio kept by the local lama, I read the legend of the guardians of the mountains, spirits that protect the passes and appear only to those who venture too deeply into the forbidden gorge. The lama pointed to an illustration, two human figures standing before a massive, flowing furred form bathed in full moonlight. These tales are no mere stories, he said. Everyone who meets the guardian is changed forever. That evening I returned to the site of the first tracks. The path of night prints led to a sheer rock wall where the snow had been scoured away. I lay against the slope and listened. The wind died, and I heard a faint, deep breath, almost a bass exhale, as if the earth itself were breathing. My muscles tensed. I saw a shadow drift along the rock fissures, and the sensation matched what Tenzin and Lama had described. When darkness fell completely, I heard a soft melody, gentle taps on metal, like a tuning fork in unknown hands. Around the corner, the creature glided onto the path, leaving icy smudges on the stones. Its form was distinct. Narrow shoulders, a proportional waist, and long legs bent oddly, almost backwards. I saw the fur on its back pulse with each step. In the falling snow, I managed only one shot. The face remained hidden in shadow, but the contours of its muzzle looked animal-like, short and broad, with powerful cheekbones and paws larger than human hands. Only the smooth, even gait hinted at something beyond any known animal. The next morning, I returned for samples. Where the camera's light had not reached, I found a tiny fragment of white fur, like that of a sable, but longer and denser. I packed it with several small, dark beads, perhaps crushed berries left as offerings or territorial marks. The local healer Dawad spoke of how, in his tribe's lore, the Yeti was linked to the power of earth and water. When the Yeti's wrath awakens, the mountain stream turns murky and the rain falls without warning. Only those brave enough to fear the dark may see the creature. A nighttime thunderstorm did not deter me from returning to camp. I lit a fire by the shepherd's hut and invited Lhakpa and Dawad to join. By the firelight they shared two more stories. How once a Yeti saved a boy who had broken through the ice, and how, at a mountain spring, villagers found a single large print leading deep into an underwater cave. At the end of the gathering, Dawad wiped his hands on his cloak and handed me a fluffy wreath of pine. This is an amulet. It holds the peace of the mountains. Carry it until the nights become days again. I fell asleep with the wreath under my pillow. The night brought a bitter chill, but in the stillness I heard that same breath once more. This time it transformed into a rhythmic thrum, like the heartbeat of the mountains beating in unison with the steps of the unseen guardian. When I peeked out of the tent at dawn, the snow around the hut was studded with tiny claw prints about 5 centimeters across. They formed a circle around the wreath, a sign that the guardian had acknowledged my presence and released me back to the world of men with its blessing. On the third day, I set out for the farthest grotto, where the trail disappeared around a bend in the rock. I left camp by the shepherd's hut, taking only a backpack with essentials, a headlamp, several thermal cameras, a stills camera, and a knife. According to Lhakpa and Dawad, this was the spot where the Yeti appeared most often, at the hidden entrance to an underground passage. The path led through a narrow corridor of collapsed boulders, the snow lying so thin that it barely concealed dozens of tiny depressions. I moved cautiously, mindful not to disturb the shepherd's markers of pine sprigs and turquoise ribbons. The silence was absolute, only the occasional drip of meltwater falling from the ceiling, breaking the monotony of waiting. When I reached the half-lit opening, my headlamp revealed several large prints in the damp snow, 7 centimeters deep, with clear claw marks at the edges. These tracks seemed to lead inside, beneath the weight of fallen stones. I knelt, ran a gloved finger along the print's edge, and noted how its shape differed from earlier ones. The usual tread pattern was gone, replaced by the natural curvature of a bare foot. Perhaps the creature had walked barefoot here, or its footpads adaptively change. Gathering my notes, I squeezed through the narrow gap. The chamber beyond was surprisingly spacious. Its ceiling soared 3 meters high, and the walls were lined with flat stones, as though someone had paved them for walking. The air smelled faintly of resin and old fur. I switched on the camera's night vision mode, and the screen glowed green. Far in the corner I caught a reflection, like a single eye the size of a tennis ball. I held my breath and took a few deliberate steps forward. Along the debris-strewn corridor moved something silent. Its silhouette, tall and slightly stooped, shoulders sloping, seemed too large for a human. The fur, hanging like a cloak from its arms to its knees, swayed gently, and its legs bent in a manner almost feline in their flexibility. Suddenly it froze, and I heard a steady thump-thump, its heartbeat resonating closer than my own. When I raised the camera, a ruby-red flash illuminated its muzzle. A broad nose, large nostrils, deep wrinkles around the brows, and dense fur so bright it seemed to glow. The creature tilted its head, studying me, and for a heartbeat its eyes burned yellow in the gloom. I pressed the shutter. Click. The black and white frame captured the moment of our meeting. Then it let out a prolonged, even roar. Not a scream, but a weary query, as if asking why I had intruded into its domain. The hush that followed swallowed all other sounds, and I stood frozen, awaiting permission to move. After a few tense seconds, the creature lowered its head and took 2 unhurried steps toward the faint tunnel at the chamber's edge, its form dissolving into the dim depths. I bolted from the grotto, my heart pounding louder than the rushing stream outside. At the entrance, I found tiny claw scores on the stone and a few strands of wet fur glittering in the moonlight. I snagged that tuft of pelt and stashed it in a sealed plastic bag. One last glance into the dark aperture revealed nothing but stillness and the lingering pulse of the mountain's secret. Back at camp, I triggered an automatic report. Contact number. Third time, 2117. Location, grotto beneath the larch thicket. 1 photo. Even roar, 2.3 seconds. Fur sample collected. The reply from headquarters arrived with a single line. Confirmed. Awaiting additional material. But the most crucial discovery was already made. The first ever photograph of a living Yeti, accompanied by its call and a physical sample. That night, as the labyrinth of silent glaciers fell into deeper quiet, I drifted to sleep, knowing the legend had ceased to be mere myth. It had become my own story, preserved in image and sound, and it would continue at dawn, when I would return to the grotto in search of further answers. Sunrise in the labyrinth of silent glaciers greeted me with a quiet, frosty freshness. I still felt a tremor in my heart from the previous night. The image of the Yeti's muzzle flashed before my eyes, and the sound of its steady roar echoed in my ears. Today's most important task was to deliver the proof to civilization. On my way to the hut, I noticed that the tracks by the grotto were slowly being covered by fresh snow. Each tiny speck on the white plain reminded me how fleeting the moments that reveal the truth can be. Yet the scrap of fur in its sealed bag held everything I had sought. The unmatched structure of the hairs and traces of white energy found in no known predator. Returning through the village, I was met with the shepherd's righteous astonishment. Lakpa and Dawad came out to greet me, holding cups of warm milk. "You saw it," Lakpa whispered, "and the photograph will prove it." Dawad nodded. Only the true guardian of the mountains could allow itself to be captured on film, and then let go. In the hut, I opened my laptop and displayed the flash-lit frame. The matted fur, broad nostrils, and yellow gleam in its eyes, all frozen on the high-resolution screen. The shepherds exchanged glances. Their silence spoke louder than any words. They knew, for the first time, a human had met the guardian, and this event would reshape the foundations of their legends. An hour later, a scientific team from the capital arrived. The lead geneticist, Professor Sangai, carefully accepted the fur sample and read aloud from the regulations. If analysis confirms an independent genetic lineage, we can announce a new primate species. A rare excitement shone in the researchers' eyes. They were witnessing science knock on the door of mystery. In the local temple, I left Dawad's amulet, a sprig of pine blessed with holy water. The Lama consecrated it in a ring of cedar smoke and proclaimed, "May the shield of the mountains always guard those who honor its silence." By midday, the first DNA test was underway. Samples were sent to a mobile laboratory set up by the stream. It seemed as if nature itself prepared. The wind whipped a swirl of snowy sparks, and the water's surface rippled in anticipation. On the tablet screen flickered graphs, a unique genetic profile matching none in the databases of known predators. A few hours later, Professor Sangay announced the results. URSID markers match no more than 68%, and mutations in genes for thermoregulation and fur pigmentation indicate an isolated population existing for at least 50,000 years. We stand on the brink of discovering a previously unknown large mammal. Like thunder on a clear day, the news spread through the village. Shepherds poured into the streets to watch a myth take shape in numbers and charts. Some wept with joy, others covered their faces with their hands. Lakpa quietly said, "Now they will take us seriously." As the sun dipped toward the horizon, I returned to the grotto one last time. Silence was laden with memory. Every fissure, every stain bore the Yeti's imprint. I placed the photograph of the guardian's face on a stone slab and whispered, "Thank you for the meeting. May your legend live on in people's hearts, as it does in these mountains." That evening, the evacuation began. A helicopter would carry me and the proof samples to the capital's laboratory. I sat at camp's edge, surveying the valley. Glaciers reflecting dawn, guarding a world where myth and reality had intertwined. A distant, steady roar drifted to me on the wind, a reminder that the guardian of the foothills would not vanish from maps or fade into the past. The next morning, I watched the helicopter ascend, feeling certain the legend had become history, and history the beginning of new knowledge. Somewhere deep in the gorge, beyond the grotto and rocky arches, the Yeti continued its silent watch, a keeper of secrets who once stepped from the shadows to gift us genuine wonder and respect for a world where miracles remain possible.